All right, welcome to July energy update that I am finally doing. I am so sorry it is late, but for some reason, any other time I was trying to do this, it just wasn't working. I moved in the end of June and all the things, but it just didn't seem to line up. It was interesting. Anyway, so needless to say, here we are. We're getting it done for the month of July. So June was hefty. I know individually for everybody it was very different, obviously, because just depending on what's going on in life and all the things as well. We have our own individual journeys, and then we've got this journey that's happening in the collective consciousness that's rolling and happening. All these things are going on now, and yes, we've had energy shifts over the last couple years. We've had integrations happening. We've had all this kind of momentum and building and working up to these points of change. And that change actually started to happen in June. So the physical pieces of this are now being put in play. The physical aspects of where it's actually starting to show up is starting to happen now. And now, some people have said to me, oh, well, Dana, this has just been complete chaos, for X amount of time. And I said, yes, but you are choosing to see that through the physical 3D rather than to feel what the actual energies feel like in between. And so they're very different if you actually feel into what has been going on as integrations and upgrades and all the things that have been happening to what has just happened in June. And it was this shift where it was an intense portion where people and everybody's reactions were different to it as well. But if you could see how people weren't aware of it, there was a lot of resistance and unsureness. And when someone's unsure, they can get, we've all been trained to go into kind of fight or flight mode almost when we don't really know what's going on, or we're not sure of change or these things that are happening kind of on an unconscious basis if we're not being aware of them. And that's sort of what happened in June. So you can see a lot of different reactions come from people due to the shifts and the changes that and this presentation of what was starting to come forth in the actual physical 3D. Now, it might seem like a lot of chaos. I've been saying this for the last 2 years for people to become more self-aware. So this becomes an easier thing to move through with an awareness and knowing that you can be uncomfortable, but you're still going to be okay. And so for the people that were able to do that or had been working on that portion for themselves, were able to move and transition with this change a little bit easier because they have chosen to do some of that inner work and they're choosing to be more aware, even if it is uncomfortable and even if it is really hard to accept some truths and certain things that are coming to light. And as much as sometimes we don't want to, right? It doesn't all look pretty. I mean, we've been saying this for a long while now. It's not going to look pretty. It's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies. When true change takes place, it is gruff and it can be ugly at times and it can feel really disruptive and it can feel really disheartening. And yet at the same time, that's where you have the shadow aspect and the light aspect. And so that's where you get to choose. You get to choose, okay, this might not look great. It's falling apart. But that actually means we have a chance to do something different with it or build or create something that is actually more helpful or going to be more in alignment with humanity and that consciousness and where we actually want to go, right, in our ascension process and who we are as beings. And so that's sort of what has happened in June. That shift has started in the physical reality. And it's always going to come down to everybody's individual perception and how they're going to choose to perceive all of it. Right? We can't force anybody to see it a certain way. We can't force somebody to say, hey, well, if you just looked at it this way, you'd feel better. It's too difficult because you're not here to change or prove anything to anybody else. You can only do that for yourself. Okay, so the month of July, now this first week that we've gone through, almost the first week here into July now, was a part of still the shift that was happening in June. And I think that's actually part of the reason why just wasn't quite lining up to get a July update out as much as I wanted to get it out earlier. But it just, the shift wasn't quite done yet. And it just didn't quite feel resonant maybe in a way that hopefully it will now, being able to actually record this today. So with July, we have almost the opposite effect going to kind of happen. Again, it's going to take personal awareness. It takes awareness to see these things different, right? You're never going to see anything different if you don't put any effort in and get a little uncomfortable and choose to challenge yourself. All right. So that's never going to change. And yet at the same time, the frequency jump is actually almost easier to recognize and easier to do in certain aspects now. So the month of July is bringing this softness. There's this stillness that's very different than a stillness I think we've ever really felt in a long time on Earth. It is this sense of hope and faith in a way, is like the only way I could probably describe this to you, with an underlining tone of excitement. And the excitement, everybody wants to know, well, what's so exciting? Why do you have to know what it is? Because if you can feel a vibration that's telling you excitement, that should tell you alignment. And that's all you should need to know. You don't really want to know the whole story, because otherwise you put yourself in another barrel to say, those are all my expectations. And if that doesn't happen, I'm going to be disappointed. Well, you're going to be disappointed every single time if that's what you're going to choose to move into, right? So this is an excitement that you just get to sit in and get to just feel, and you get to just learn how to integrate how to feel that. Okay, this is a peace. It's a sense of peace and fulfillment of not just self. Okay, we're going to talk more on the collective side of things now. The rest of 2025 is going to be in a collective way where you're going to see more and more changes if you're choosing to be aware of those changes. So collectively, you're seeing more movement starting to happen now in the human consciousness. You've got this working group of brains and awareness that are ascending together, and of course bringing the rest of humanity with them to certain degrees, because when you have people that are aware and choosing to be aware, they're the ones actually raising vibrational set points in the human collective consciousness. I heard something very fascinating one day, and it was literally only 1% of the population is needed to be aware enough to actually change the frequency of human consciousness. 1%. That's it. It is not very much if you really think of it at a large scale of 1%. Okay, so we are in this trajectory where there's enough people awakened up to their own consciousness, to self, doing inner work, choosing now, not just following the fear, the beliefs that have been set out before them, and not questioning things. I am talking about younger generations that are naturally born into a higher frequency, but there are lots of people in the other generations as well that are choosing to wake up. Okay, so that is this month of July, is this almost common effect in this wholeness that's coming together from all these changes that have been going on so far throughout the year, and that are going to continue throughout the year of 2025. There's amazing stuff yet to come. It has been maybe bumpy, sure, for the first 6 months, but that is what chaos does. It's a destruction, and also the providing of a platform for creation. And we've now hit the creation mode. There's been enough of the destruction and the pulling down happening now that you're going to start to see more of this path being presented of this. Again, this is part of that excitement, this faith, this renewed hope for humanity. And these things that start to come out to show us, maybe there still is things that we can be hopeful for, even in the duality that we're in for, right? That there is true change happening, and that it doesn't, history doesn't need to repeat itself. People repeat history because they're in refusal to actually believe something else can happen. But there's enough people now wanting true change and are truly hopeful and knowing. Now, not just hoping though, it's a knowing that these things can actually happen. And so that's the sense in July, is this renewed faith and hope. And some are going to laugh. They'll be like, yeah, well, it's summertime in Canada, in US and whatever. And if y'all get snow, like most of you do, I'm sure, our winters can be very internal and reflective. And summer can always feel more bright and, hopeful and all these things. But I'm telling you, this is different. And if you truly choose to sit with it and feel into that, you will notice that it is different. It is not just this almost false sense because the weather's nice and we all feel better. It is a vibrational set point that is coming into play, okay? There's a lot of things happening in the realms and the dimensions that have created this to start happening in the physical 3D world. Remember, the 3D is the most dense you can get. So in which all this needs to be created within the realms of energy first, long before it could ever actually be pulled into the physical reality of things. Plus, we needed enough people to actually believe in it. And now we do. We have that. So the sense of renewed hope in July. Now, this is a time where we can talk a little bit individually here, where some people might feel really creative and kind of wanting to continue action or follow some things, or, whatever kind of might show up. But I am going to tell you to jump in with both feet and don't second guess yourself. This is truly a month that, like, the more you question yourself on something, the quicker you're going to talk yourself out of it, for one. But for two, you're going to squash that feeling of this excitement and renewed hope that's actually there. So rather than focusing fully on just self, I would say this month, I would say if you want to see more of what is actually happening on the collective, that would be a better place to focus and observe, is more collectively, and choosing to see situations and choosing to see people in different lights, because that will actually show you more collectively what is coming and what's going to be, happening, or how it's truly happening and true change is actually taking place. And if you want to be a part of that or not is up to you as an individual. But for you to observe it this month, I think will be very helpful for many to understand that the connection here is so deeply starting to be ingrained and integrated so differently that it can be extremely exciting and almost overwhelming, actually, when you really grasp that and feel into that and you recognize that connection and this wholeness and this oneness that is really starting to be built. Now it's funny because I can hear my team kind of like saying that there's a few things happening out, in the realms and in that factor of energy and how we all come together. And yet at the same time, there's this notion where they want everybody to understand that it is a oneness not of just humanity and our earth. There's a oneness starting to happen universally with earth again. And this factor that we are choosing to ask for, that external help, where we know that we're limited as physical 3D beings here to the extent of what our earth has been so far. And yet many are starting to understand there's a lot of help here for us as well. And so there's many extending more into that help and more asking of, can we make this for the highest good and the highest, greatest good for humanity on earth? And what is it that we can give back, in a sense, at the universal level as well? So there's more of this connection being built as well. So they automatically just started talking about more of this phenomenon. So UFO phenomenon, or really strange aspects or experiences that people are trying to write off and they just can't anymore. I mean, it's been happening, sure, for the last 4, 5, 6 years, but it's going to up in the next 6 months of this year, and then of course over the next couple years. So there's things that are going to happen in the physical 3D world that are going to be rather unexplainable, even at a scientific level. They're going to try and write it off. They might try and say it's this or that, just so they're, wanting to create the fear, or they're wanting to do whatever, or they don't really want people to actually understand what this really is. But more and more that's actually going to continue to happen as well. And so even in the month of July, where this peace is, this sense of peace and this sense of calm and connectedness, I think more people are going to actually have more experiences in some really interesting but really beautiful ways that I think a lot might not even know how to talk about. But at the same time, deep down, it'll be a sensation and a knowing and an experience for all of us, no matter what level you're on. Maybe you're sitting here listening to this, you've been part of the spiritual aspect of, and your understanding is a lot larger. And, you're like, yeah, well, it's nothing out of the norm for us to think like that. It's not for us, right? But for even us to have certain experiences, I mean, it's never ending. There's never going to be a point where you get to in your life where you're like, oh man, I've seen it all, learned it all, been there, right? And for many of us that, are very authentic in our own ways, we all know that. But I think that they wanted me to bring that up again because they want to bring back again that sense of magic, and it's never going to go away. You're never going to have enough experiences, or and they're talking outside of meditation. I'm not talking about having experiences in meditation. I'm talking about having experiences in the physical 3D world now, where they are truly making themselves more known in different ways and bringing it to this aspect of reality that's almost, it's been certainly unattainable for certain people, but even for people highly into the, the metaphysical worlds and, whatever you want to call this crap, woo woo, all the terms everybody has, right? It doesn't even matter. What matters is the fact that so many of us are easily able to access that through meditation, right? Because we're the ones choosing to go into those worlds, or we're pushing ourselves more out of the physical 3D, becoming more of that energy. But it's being so embodied now in July that more people are not pushing so hard to say, okay, well, I'm here in the 3D. This is what happens here. And that's what happens in meditation a lot of the time. I've never really had experiences from meditation happen so much in the physical. that is what's going to start happening. And in this month of July, it feels so supportive of these beings that are really going to be trying to give people different experiences in our physical 3D world to an extent to start to also understand dimensions. Okay. There's going to be the veils. And the best way I've ever been explained and given an analogy of a veil is as if it's like a sheer curtain, right? We can, if we look directly through the sheer curtain, you see straight through it. But if you kind of look at it from the perspective of your peripheral vision, you can start to see it move in different ways, even though there may not be a breeze at all, right? We have this experience with it that's very different than when we actually look directly through it. Now, the thing about the veils is they're changing. Okay, that's been a part of what's been integrating as well in the universal side of things, in the dimensions and the changes. And as Earth raises her vibration, we're literally changing the dimensions of how Earth herself actually plays in veils, because we're accessing different dimensions in the vibrational set points of things, which of course is changing how we're perceiving them as human and how we are able to interact with them differently. Okay, so the month of July is going to be a bit more of that as well, where we are going to have different experiences in dimensions and realms of the physical 3D senses. And that's really exciting to me, because it finally, I feel like maybe some people will actually have some experiences that'll be so unshakable that they are not going to just be able to talk themselves out of it anymore. There's too many of us that are believing in this and do know it's all, true and factor, because you can't create energy and you can't destroy it. All you can do is shape it and change it. And that is what's literally happening as Mother Earth chooses in herself to change vibrational frequencies. So, of course, us as human are going to have a very different interaction with the dimensions as well. So that's going to be also a part of July. Now, there's nothing scary about it. Again, it's going to come down to everybody's own individual's beliefs. We know that. If you've got a belief and you're terrified of it, of course, you're probably going to, freak yourself out, if something happens and you get too much into your head about it. So this is again why I always tell you to feel. If you can feel into certain things that are happening or certain things that are going on, do you feel safe? Do you actually feel as though you're in danger? Because those are the two big ones that are really big deciphers between just freaking yourself out in your mind comparing to actually knowing if you're, actually in danger, right? A lot of the time we're never actually in danger. It's our brain that makes us feel like we might die, or the body reaction because it's something that it's held as its blueprint for so long, right? And so again, all that is changing, but it's also coming to the surface to be looked at, because it's not truth for so many people. And so this is going to be a time too, if you do have an experience and you're not sure of what the hell just happened, I would suggest not questioning it so much and trying to figure out what or why, because a lot of it's never going to make sense in our physical 3D world anyway. Our brains are too our physical minds and physical eyes are really only meant to have the experience of the now, of right now in the physical 3D world, and it can never comprehend fully how everything else actually works outside of that, because it's just not how the physical body is built, right? Think of your car. Your car drives and it has the engine and it knows that this is how it runs, and this is what our blueprint is. The car tells me this is what makes it work, this is what makes the wheels turn, this is what we need to as fuel to make the wheels, all those bits and pieces. You think of your physical body the same kind of way. It can only determine and use frequency in those ways. So when you have different experiences that seem to make absolutely no sense in the physical 3D world, that's where I would say don't drive yourself mad. I would say to you, feel into that experience instead of trying to think through that experience, because thinking through it will never make any sense. So the month of July is going to bring a lot of curiosity for certain people, but also at the same time, a lot of, again, a sense of renewed faith, hope, excitement, as long as you're willing to allow yourself to feel that. It was something they just said to me, was very interesting. They just said, so many of you still believe you are undeserving of even feeling those things simply just through the realms. So it's not even the fact that someone's coming to give you a gift, let's say. It's literally in the factor that it's going to be presented to you as a humanity in your collective consciousness. And yet so many individual people still believe that they're so unworthy of even receiving something as simple as a frequency through the collective consciousness, that there are many that will actually resist it. And so you may hear a lot of people I hate to say it, but you might actually hear the complaining go up, or they're gonna try and talk about very different things or change subjects very quickly, and yet at the same time, they might get irritated because if you're trying to come back to the same subject and yet they're unconsciously changing it likely, by the way. Um, you might find people become a little bit more irritated in the ways of like, "You're not listening to me," is what they just said to me. So it's almost gonna be this factor of where you really do feel like you're listening to them and you're trying to be that support or you're trying to be, that ear to really truly just sit and listen to someone maybe because they feel like, they're getting things off their chest, as many say, and yet you're having them kind of turn around and say, "You're not listening to me." This is not a time to take anything personally ever, but this is definitely not one of those. You're going to literally see people have almost monologue talks with themselves, saying that they're talking to somebody else, but they're really not. They're talking to themselves. And in a way, the higher self is going to come through in July as well in a different aspect that I don't think many are quite ready for either. And it'll kind of maybe be a little bit of an ass kick for some people. But again, in recognition, if you see things happening like this with people around you, don't be afraid to extend an olive branch, especially if you know or you've been there or you've had experiences, but don't use words. Okay. I'm going to literally tell you all don't use words. And I'm so sorry if you're an external processor. Um, but don't use words if you're extending an olive branch to someone else around you or your friends or family or whoever might be struggling a little bit, especially if you notice that they're really having that inner monologue and their higher self maybe has stepped in and it looks like they're having a little bit of a rough go. I am telling you, you're not here to have conversation with that person at a physical level. I'm here to tell you that you can extend an olive branch through energy container for that person, but it is still up to them to accept. So do not take it upon yourself if all of a sudden it doesn't seem like it's not working or you've tried and yet maybe you're not doing enough. That's not true either, okay? There's many people that are waking up and have had awakenings to enough to be aware to certain degrees that we are now wanting so badly to help everybody else around us. But you also must remember everybody is here on their own journey and you can only give the seeds and show them how to plant them in the ground even through an energetic set point with no words, but that person still has to accept that themselves at a free will level. Okay. So that's the other piece to this. And if it's not working, that's okay. If it doesn't seem like it's working and they're not choosing that, that's okay. You need to accept people's journeys and where they're at. And if it seems to be not in alignment with you anymore, I'm going to tell you July is going to be the last time you're going to be able to recognize and walk away yourself. I'm going to say there might be a little bit more chaos in August when it comes to relationships, because that's what it definitely feels like it's building more towards as people are continuing to choose which side of the vibration they are wanting to be on, right? And where people are just at simply in their own journeys. Okay. So, yes, the month of July is going to be a little bit more still, a little bit of a breath, let's say. You're going to feel some of that intenseness release a little bit more. Enjoy it. Go slow when you feel like you need to go slow. And if you feel like you want to run, go for it. But stop thinking about things. I know it sounds wild, but stop thinking about things. If it feels right, go for it. Okay. My next podcast episode I'm going to put, I will continue to talk a little bit about my own journey, where I'm at, what's been going on since I've put all my stuff into storage, what's been happening with the dog, with myself, with my own learnings. And I will use myself an example, but hopefully it will help many to understand why I keep telling you to feel rather than to think. Because thinking, you will think yourself into circles. It's not how we're naturally actually meant to function. We're meant to function through energy first, which is our first language, and then thought as a secondary. So our language is only for us to make sense as to other physical 3D beings, like I'm doing with you right now, right here. And when I say I am trying to figure out frequency to put it into words, that's literally what I am doing. I am not necessarily always being told all the words I need to be saying right now. Okay, so feel into things. If you see people struggling, extend the olive branch if you wish as an energetic boundary. Do not have conversation. I am telling you right now, nobody is going to hear unless they want to hear it, for one. And for two, they're going to flip it into a narrative that makes more sense and more comfortable for them, even if that's not actually what you were saying. Okay. So, no language to be had if you are noticing someone struggling. Do it through the energy first, allow that person to come to you. And if they still want to have a conversation, I would still suggest, probably, even if you're listening, you make sure that you understand not to take anything personally if all of a sudden the flip scripts a little bit and they are now saying you're not listening, right? Because remembering the higher self is going to kind of be stepping in different ways as well, because this energy is presenting an opening to have that happen. So our souls are literally being more invited into the human experience than ever before. And it's really exciting times, guys. I know it might not always seem like it. I know that the first 6 months, especially of this year, have been a little chaotic, a little all over the place, but it's just been a little bit of continuation even from the last couple years. I mean, everybody wants to say it's one thing over another, but it never is. It's always been a buildup. It's been building up, and now we're hitting peak. Okay, so we're gonna hit peak, and the most amazing things can happen, but you have to be aware enough to recognize that before you're going to see it. So practice that. Use the stillness. Practice some more self awareness, practice observation of the collective consciousness, collectively, all together, watching things. Don't allow your brain to think things through, feel them first. And I absolutely wish you all the most amazing rest of your July. And I hope that no matter where life takes you, that you remember that this is an experience. It's not who you are. You have simply come here to experience your soul and self in a very different level than is ever really possible anywhere else in this universe. It's not an easy life, I know that. But at the same point, embrace it, because we are the souls that have chosen to come here. And we're highly regarded and respected for that decision, because many souls don't want to come here for the factor that it is too much for some. So understand and know you are so well supported in so many different ways. Even if you feel lonely on certain days, just remember you never are, because you're not actually human. This is a big game of Jumanji. So much love to all of you, and I will talk to you all very soon. And thank you so much for tuning in once more. I still have the community up and running. We've been meeting twice a month. So if you're interested in that, please come and join us. It is a subscription, but it is 100% worth it from so many of our others that have been through it or are still with us. They enjoy having that support. So if you're looking for a group that's non-judgmental and support, we do all sorts of different things. You can find that in the description or send us a message and I will answer any of your questions. Good day to you all.